I want to tell you guys a little story, and I'm going to call this story My Brush with Epstein World. So the story goes like this, all right? It's a funny story. It's a sad story. No, I'm not in the Epstein files. Okay, guys, just relax. But it is about my brush with this, what we know, right? Is this sort of network that was running parts of the world, right? Running our financial systems in many cases. So story goes like this. A few years ago, right? I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, something like that. I was looking for a job, all right? And I'm not really the kind of guy for whom, looking for a job is a simple or an easy thing, right? So at this point, I'd been chief economist and chief strategy officer of one of the world's largest corporations, right? So when you get to that level, finding another job at that level is tricky. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of legwork. I'm not saying this to you so you cry for me, right? Just so you understand. So what happened was that in London at that time, I reached out to a bunch of sort of advisory groups, okay? And these guys were at the edges of sort of geopolitics and finance and economics, right? And I'd been chief economist of a major thing. I'd been chief strategy officer. So I thought, great, it's right up my alley, right? And these guys were also looking for sort of chief whatever, right? So I reached out to these guys and I started talking to them. And I was expecting to sort of have normal conversations with them, right? Like, hey, Omer, you're one of the most followed people on topics of politics and the economy and finance. Tell us more. What do you think is going to happen in the world? Like basic stuff, right? Interview stuff. And what happened was something totally different, which was that I was met with this really weird, frigid, absolutely icy, hostile, bitter kind of reception. And they weren't really interviews in the normal sense of the word at all. And I was very shaken by this, right? I couldn't understand what was going on here. I would try and talk to them, and everything would be met with this frigid, icy kind of, this really hostility, this pure contempt towards me emanating from them, right? And if you followed my work, right, over the years, I'm one of the good guys, right? Like, I'm not a saint. I'm just saying that, like, I believe in human progress and human development and democracy and all of these things. So I was very puzzled by this, right? Because putatively, this was what the job was supposed to be, right? Like looking at politics, finance, economics, seeing how things are shaken out. I couldn't understand why I was being met with this aggression and being iced out in this really obnoxious, off-kilter way. And so that happened, right? Fine. Okay, so I moved on with my life, and a year later, a friend said to me, I was talking about this with a friend, and a friend said to me, well, what did you expect? And I was like, well, what do you mean, what did I expect? And he said, well, those guys' job is just to cover up for the bad guys. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, thank you for telling me, right? And it sort of registered with me a little bit, like they had clients who this kind of friend of mine would think were the bad guys, right? Oil companies or big banks or whatever. And I don't know that that necessarily makes you a bad guy, but I understood the drift of what he was saying, and I didn't think too much about it, right? And then recently, the Epstein files came out, right? So it turns out that one of these outfits that I was talking to was run by a guy called Peter Mandelson. Okay, Peter Mandelson, former business secretary in Britain. Okay, and it turns out, and now he's totally disgraced, right? He's been forced to resign from the House of Lords. There's police investigation, all kinds of things, because it's like deep links to Epstein. And I'll just read you something from my phone, right? There's an article published by Sky News in the UK. Peter Mandelson committed a betrayal of his country by allegedly leaking government secrets to Jeffrey Epstein and putting Britain at risk, former Prime Minister Gordon Brown has said. Lord Mandelson, his ex-business secretary, has been accused of sharing market-sensitive information with the U.S. sex offender after the 2008 global financial crisis. Mr. Brown said he felt shocked, sad, angry, betrayed, let down. All of the information he passed on, the papers by other advisors, were commercially sensitive. This was financially secret information. It meant that Britain was at risk because of that. The currency was at risk. Some of the trading that would happen would be speculative as a result of that. There's no doubt that huge commercial damage could have been done and perhaps was done. So that's Gordon Brown, the former prime minister talking, right? And he's probably one of Britain's best prime ministers of the last 25 years. And he made a big mistake, right, by making Mandelson his business secretary. And I don't think even he knew at the time that Mandelson was sort of deeply enmeshed with Epstein. So what was happening at that time, to me, And again, I'm not saying this so you cry for me. This is a story about how the world really works, okay? What was happening to me at that time was I felt like there was an invisible force pushing against me, right? That I would go and talk to these guys, and I would be met with this insane, icy, frigid, hostile, aggressive, nasty reception. And I really, like, no matter how much I tried, invisible force, right? Like, just pushing against me, pushing me out. And now it's pretty obvious, right, what it was. Like, these guys were, right, like Epstein level guys, right? This whole kind of crew, this whole group of this whole world, right? Of these, whatever, advisories, consultancies, blah, blah, mini investment banks, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. And when I was in the room with them, they must have obviously read some of my writing, right? And they must have immediately identified me, not as a candidate, but as a threat. And what was really going on in that room was they were sort of maybe a little bit testing me to see if I was willing to sort of join the dark side, right? Which I'm not. But they were also sort of sending me a warning maybe, or sussing me out a little bit to see if I was going to be a threat to them, right? Because I have a fairly big platform, whatever, right? So that's the way the world really works, right? At the time, even my friends would say to me, listen, man, there's something going on here. There's some kind of invisible wall that you've come up against. There really is some kind of invisible force you're pushing against, and you can't get past that, and we don't know what it is. And now we do know what it is, right? That there really are these insider groups that are running, right, our institutions, and these linkages. Gordon Brown talking about like the currency of the entire United Kingdom, the British pound, being at risk because Mandelson was leaking stuff to Epstein, allegedly, right? That's as serious as it gets, right? If you can, right, manipulate or have information on the value of a currency, the sky's the limit. So this is the way the world really works. There really are. So these secret networks running the world, and worse, they appear to be every bit what, right, conspiracy theorists said, like networks of pedophiles, blah, whatever, right? You can go down the list. I don't want to get into that in this particular video, but I do want to connect that back to like where the world is, right? So I launched this sort of mini hedge fund for you guys called Havens. You can check it out if you want. The point is really that when we have these insider networks just assuming control beyond the law, beyond any morality, beyond any reason, and they're just basically cronyist, right? They're basically just doing each other favors. And who cares if the currency tanks? Who cares if the bond market tanks? Well, that is what creates the macro risk that is now dominating our world, right? And that's why I created Havens, because now we live in a world where typical financial assets are not that trustworthy anymore, right? US government bonds, US stocks, US dollar. So these things are intimately connected. The fact that we're living in a world where these secret, shadowy networks will own private islands and take kids to them, blah, 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 all this horrible stuff, really exist. And they're really doing favors for each other. And it's not just like, get my nephew a job, right? It's not just like, hey, man, can I borrow your car for a day or something? It's really like, hey, I'm going to give you information on the value of a country's currency, right? I'm going to do, right, these incredible, unbelievable favors for you, right down to the sex trafficking stuff, allegedly. Right? So it's the way the world really works. And it's even thrown me a little bit, right? Like, I'm happy that I have an answer for what was the invisible force I was pushing against in those days. But even I'm a little bit surprised that the invisible force was like the Epstein network, right? Pedophile Island and all the insiders, right? And even whatever heights I'd reached, right? Chief economist, chief strategy officer, published by Harvard, blah, 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 whatever. I was never remotely an insider to these guys. And it was like, in that room, guys, it was like they could smell it on me, you know? That's the thing that really strikes me and it stayed with me. That somehow, the second that I walked in, or even before I walked in, they could smell it on me. I wasn't one of them. They knew, and I wasn't going to be one of them. I'm never going to be the kind of guy that's like, hey, can I come to Pedophile Island, right? Like, come on. But they could smell it on me, right? And in that instant, bang, it was game over. Insider, outsider, right? You're never going to be part of the network. So this is really how the world works. And it's a sad thing. It's at odds with our myths of meritocracy. It's at odds with our ideas of, work hard and get ahead. It devalues all of us, right? It made me feel very devalued for a long time. Hey, man, I have all these accomplishments. What the fuck? Like, why am I not getting anywhere, right? It devalues us. It makes us feel demoralized. It makes us feel disoriented. How is it that these monsters have ascended to the heights where the rest of our lives are playthings to them? These are questions that we should all be thinking very deeply about. So this kind of like a little intro, right? It's a little story about how the world really works, a little kind of insight, glimpse into why I created Havens. It's also a glimpse into why Havens is doing so well, right? In a world like this, we're all going to run for the doors. We're all going to flee for the exits and find the havens. You can't trust a world like that, right? That's run by monsters. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But for now, I just wanted to share my little sad and funny story with you. I hope, I don't know, I hope it was edifying in a way. It certainly was edifying for me to go through all this and learn about it firsthand. So I thought that maybe you'd appreciate that perspective. I'll make more videos and I'll talk to you guys soon. Okay? Thanks for listening. Bye.